Good afternoon. I'm Gina Grillo, President of the Advertising Club. I hope that you are all continuing to stay healthy and enjoy summer, even with all the restrictions that are placed on us. We really appreciate that you're tuning in because we know that you have many options in the webinar world. Today, we're collaborating with Cargo, a true partner. As a corporate member of the club, a strong supporter of our foundation efforts, and now content co-creators. We encourage more of our members to share ideas with us. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank members of the team, Laura Maxwell from Cargo, Alicia Greenberg, and Meredith Lipson from the Ad Club. All have worked really hard to bring this content today. As a working mom of 3, always hungry teens, I can tell you that QSR has had a rebirth in our home during COVID. This discussion is of particular interest. So let's get on with the show. Please welcome the one and only Harry Cardman, founder, CEO of Cargo Global. Take it away, Harry.
Thanks, Gina. First off, I just wanted to thank you for helping put this together. It's super exciting to come together. I know that everybody is at home virtually. Probably most people are getting burnt out from Zoom fatigue. But as an industry, it's so important for us to still communicate ideas, educate each other, and even come together in these virtual settings. And, for you and your organization to help pull this together and bring us all together, it's such an important part of who we are as an industry. I'm thrilled today. We have such an extraordinarily amazing group of individuals who are leading some of the largest thinking around strategy, innovation in the quick serve restaurant category. They have been under extraordinary, novel circumstances that I think have challenged us all, but in particular, I think the restaurant industry, and especially sort of feeding society when we've been faced with this pandemic, to be at the very forefront of that thinking, of that education, of that strategy, and sort of seeing day to day at such a macro scale what is happening to society, especially given the role that they play. It's super exciting for me just as a bystander to watch and talk with such individuals that are at the very center of it. So I wanted, without further ado, to sort of introduce everybody on this panel. I'm very lucky to lead such an incredible group who's really been so thoughtful about how to bring their businesses back, but also understand what this means to society as a whole. And so let me start out with Adrian. Adrian Ingold is the Chief Marketing and Brand Officer, as well as Chief Experience Officer at Jack in the Box. She is focused on the strategy, media, communications, D&I of Jack in the Box, everything that they're doing today, all of their repositioning in the market, all of the things that Jack in the Box faces, given sort of the audience that they serve, she's been focused on. And as she puts it, she does whatever the boss tells her to do. And so I want to introduce Adrian first. Second, I want to introduce Renato Rossi from Burger King. Renato is the head of marketing North America for Burger King. He's effectively the CMO for North America. Again, like Adrian, focused on strategy, innovation for all of North America for Burger King, and really leads the charge in terms of that brand in America and sort of our experience with the Burger King brand. George Felix, I've known George for much of his career, going all the way back to Procter & Gamble. Has been a friend, especially his previous stint at KFC. He is now the Chief Marketing Officer of Pizza Hut. Everything that you're seeing with Pizza Hut now is underneath him. He focuses on PR, media, communication strategy. Similarly, and finally, Andy Rebin, who's at El Pollo Loco, who's the Chief Digital Officer and leads sort of all digital innovation, their entire strategy around app, their digital strategy in terms of signing up third parties with regard to on-demand ordering that you've seen, and a lot of this sort of digital strategy and experience at El Pollo Loco. So Without further ado, let's, now that I've introduced everybody, let's kick it off with a super fun first question. In terms of sort of just what are you seeing out there today? Obviously, the market is very different since pre-pandemic. Probably usage and customer behavior has changed. And when we were talking about it, you know, what we saw is that there's this behavior change in terms of using the drive-thru, using app. You know, the question is, demographics changed? Has purchase size changed? Has time of day changed in terms of overall consumer consumption? And let me kick it off to you, Adrienne, to kick it off.
Thank you, Harry. Appreciate you having us on this morning. I can say this morning here in San Diego. And happy Taco Tuesday to those of you in the East Coast markets. But yeah, I think we've lived through a pretty crazy world, as Gina said when we began. Everything has changed. I think that's a broad question in the sense that there is no normal anymore. We have seen that consumers back in March, when the shelter-in-place orders were first put into effect, you know, folks were hoarding everything they could scrape off the grocery store shelves, and you couldn't really, you know, find anything when you went to the grocery store. And once folks worked through all of that inventory on their shelves at home, they wanted to get back out, but they didn't know how to do that safely. And I think it really became an opportunity for us as marketers to train people that sheltering at home meant that you could leave your house once a day, you could get in your car, and in our case, you could go through a drive-thru for a contactless experience and pick up some food because you were sick of cooking by that point. And so we've had to help consumers sort of navigate their way through the pandemic since then. As some states and cities reopened areas, those restaurants were opened again, but then many of them have been shut down. Folks have very different perspectives on what safety means and how comfortable they are venturing out to get a great meal from one of these brands. And so I think it's really been a season of being nimble and needing to pivot on a dime as the world changes around us. We've seen great early adoption from folks that normally wouldn't adopt some of our contactless options, like our mobile app and delivery. You know, our mobile and delivery sales at Jack in the Box are doubled since the beginning of the beginning of the pandemic, excuse me. And we're excited to see that momentum continue, because I don't believe as we come through this that folks are going to go back to what normal was in February. I think some of these new behaviors of wanting a safer option, not dining in, bringing things home, will stick with folks for a while. As I said, folks have very different views of, you know, what is comfortable for them. And so I think it'll be a long tail in terms of coming out of this pandemic and returning to whatever that new normal is.
No, that's great. And when we talked, one of the things that you mentioned, which I think is a little bit different some of the other folks on the panel, is that you talk about deals for the center of the plate, but then you talk about sort of your add-on options. And that's what you're sort of seeing as being adopted in market. Why don't you share a little bit more about that and what that means for the overall marketing and media and sort of positioning of yourselves in market?
Yeah, we absolutely at Jack in the Box are known for this ooey gooey, cheesy, indulgent sort of guilty pleasure food. And I think as people have been sheltered at home, they've returned to some of those comfort food needs. You know, people want a sense of normalcy and a sense of comfort when they don't have it otherwise. And so we seem to do well there. And even prior to the pandemic, we have always experienced success, not only with good value, some $4.99 bundles, but also those add-on strategies, as you mentioned. So those smaller, snackable, less expensive options like our tiny tacos and popcorn chicken have done really well for us prior to the pandemic and also through the pandemic. Gives people a little sense of an escape when you can dig into something really indulgent. And we see those items frequently added on to guest orders. So they're boosting average check size, which is what we're seeing across the category right now as folks look for opportunities to feed their whole household, whether that's family and kids or that's roommates and the sorority house, you know, whoever you're sheltered in place with, you can come to Jack in the Box and not only experience the breadth and depth of our menu so that everyone can get something that satisfies their craving, but you can also come 4 times in a week and not feel like you're eating the same old chicken sandwich because we have so many options. You can try something new. And so we've continued through the pandemic to launch some of those center of the plate $4.99 bundles, as well as those add-ons, those snackable items that have performed well for us prior to the pandemic.
I'll share that when we talk, just the breadth of the menu, because I obviously only really eat the burgers because they're amazing. But what I found with the breadth of the menu is that was surprising to me, and especially sort of how the fact that you have such diversity amongst that. So let me turn it over to George. George, you're relatively new you've been at Yum for a while, but you're relatively new at Pizza Hut. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing out there, maybe some of the differences that you experienced on the KFC side going to Pizza Hut, and then sort of the things that you're actually seeing from a consumption perspective now that you sort of joined there.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Thanks for having me. I started at Pizza Hut in January, and so we're like right in the middle of turnaround mode, and like how do we reclaim being America's favorite pizza again, and and then obviously this hits, and so the things that I saw, especially comparing to my past experience on KFC, like being on Pizza Hut, having our own delivery channel, being so developed in e-commerce, really benefited us through this, as Adrian mentioned, as people were especially in the early stages in lockdown, there was that period of I don't want to eat anywhere, but then once they were kind of open to like, hey, I want to go get back out there, then it became more of like, what are the safe options, what are the available options, and what are the easy options? And so for us, it was really like, it was interesting. Like we had to pivot our messaging strategy to like things I would have never thought we'd be, saying like, hey, we're open, we're open for business, and, really getting that message out there. Really making sure people understood that they could get, the reliable pizza that they love. And thankfully pizza is it's a comfort food. It's a familiar food. It's something that can kind of, the whole family can agree on. And so, I think, we've really seen that people, are looking for those kind of familiar foods. And then finally, like that we can deliver it safely, or we can get it to you safely. And so having our own delivery channel and being able to pivot quickly to meet the needs of and the expectations of customers, whether that's safety seals on our boxes, contactless delivery, app usage, contactless curbside, that was a big pivot we had to make, pretty quickly. Was once people, started, as this, as the pandemic, went on, people started getting out more after that initial lockdown phase. What we saw was that as people were getting, going out for their grocery run, it was like they wanted to do, everything they could in one run. If they're going to go out, they wanted to make it count. And so we started seeing our carryout business really picking up. And so, we had to make sure that we had the safe, just like we did on contactless delivery. We were able to be the first national pizza chain to have contactless curbside pickup. And so that was seen as a big value to our customers, because they didn't have to leave the safety of their car. They could put their order in advance, pull up, through the app, let the team know they're there, and then their pizza was delivered right to the back of their car without, safely with, a gloved team member and masked team member. So there's things like that, in the previous world, I feel like would have taken us months, maybe a year to figure out the process. We were doing in a matter of weeks. And so our team members and operations teams just did an awesome job on that. I think you're on mute, Harry.
Just to reiterate, and I was on mute, just to reiterate, it sounds like both of you experienced a massive drop with sort of the stay at home, where everybody was going out to grocery. And then instantaneously, as people got sick of cooking at home, that sort of drove back a second choice. And that home meal, feeding the family, what I heard previously is that the ticket size grew pretty tremendously over sort of the single person. And both of you sort of experienced that. I want to sort of take it over next to Andy to talk a little bit about what you're seeing from the digital side, and then I'll hand it over to Renato. Why don't you take us through like a little bit of what you've done from a pivot perspective, given that you've been focused on the digital experience. I mean, everybody has, but this is your whole focus. Why don't you share a little bit about what you guys were looking at and some of the options that you put in place, which seems like everybody is adopting across the industry to sort of stay competitive.
Thanks, Harry. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the panel too. So I would say, for us, similar to what Adrian mentioned earlier, we've seen some staggering results from a digital perspective. Delivery is up 3 or 4x what we were used to seeing prior to the pandemic. Our digital sales are up about 2.5 times. And, for us, it was about ensuring the customers who are first-time digital adopters and customers who have chosen us for quite some time, that they were safe when they were coming to our restaurants. We definitely rolled out a much greater form of segmentation during the pandemic. We really targeted the family consumers, the value consumers who are typically visiting us during the week. We wanted to make sure consumers knew that we were still thinking about them, and obviously making sure that we were adjusting to their shifting needs in the ever-changing environment. I think one of the things that we spoke about during the prep call was you kind of saw a lot of QSR brands emerge with the offering of free delivery. And free delivery came up, 1 week, 2 weeks with different brands. And one of the things that we found just speaking to our consumers was they wanted something that was consistent, that was going to deliver on a regular basis. And so what we did was on April 1st, we launched free delivery for however long is necessary with Postmates. And we still have that deal in place today. It's something that our consumers have definitely gravitated towards. We're up about 5x specifically on the Postmates platform. And essentially, it's just something that the consumers have come to rely on. It's something that we felt comfortable with as a brand to introduce. And given the certain times and the uncertainty with people going out, it was something that did very well for us.
And you had also mentioned that basically not only was delivery important, but also in that process, the perception of safety. You want to talk a little bit about what you did there and why? And I think everybody was taking away when we were talking in the prep, everybody was talking really about that consumer concern. Why don't you share a little bit about what you were working on?
Right.
On that front.
So, we're a restaurant that typically saw a lot more dine-in versus traditional drive-thru and or carry-out. So for us, it was about how do we pivot quickly? How do we make sure our customers are aware of the actions and the measures we're taking to make our restaurants safe? And so for us, it was the masks, it was the gloves, it was the sanitizer. That constantly became part of our communication stream, whether that be on social channels or on email. Making sure that it was always in any type of communication we sent out to our consumer base. The other big thing that we did is we did a lot of social listening, right? So making sure if there were areas of opportunity that the customer said we needed to improve on, we acted on it quickly, we pivoted. Worked very closely with our operations team to make sure that we were able to adjust to the ever-changing environment. The other thing that I think has been very challenging as a brand is we operate in 6 different states and many different city municipalities. And for me, every single municipality kind of had their own quirk to it. So there are some that were requiring masks, others that were not. So for us, it was very important for us to kind of take a stand as a brand across the board and obviously make sure that our customers, but ultimately our employees were safe when they're on the job.
No, that's great. And we'll get into some of the strategies that you employed. I would love to hear a little bit more about the sealed contactless delivery bags, and we'll get into that in a second. But let me turn it over to Renato. Renato, you shared with us that, and thank you for coming and participating, but you shared with us that actually you saw changes in terms of the behavior of what people were buying and when. Why don't you take us a little bit through that and some of the larger trends and things that you saw since we went into this period?
For sure, Harry, and good afternoon from Miami, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I think we saw in our brand, Burger King, a lot of the same, changes in guest behavior as already shared here. I think the lenses of being able to compare what happened here in the United States with over 50, 60 countries abroad. The drive-thru was a real game changer in this whole situation, because I think in this process of making our consumers feel safe, obviously it's easier to feel safe as you are staying inside your car than actually having to come inside a place where you will inevitably touch surface and getting closer contact with people. So I think this allowed brands like us to go through the worst period of this crisis in a much stronger way than some of other countries that we saw abroad. Having said that, we saw large shifts, as you mentioned, Harry. So a few of the things that we've saw. First, think with the reduction or the closing down of all like full service restaurants and many casual dinings, and people have less options, right? So even guests or consumers that wouldn't normally be a Burger King, like a visitor coming in, we saw them coming in straight into like what we are best known for, right? So we saw our overall, let's say, kind of a range of burgers, and especially the Whopper, grew disproportionately to other parts of the portfolio. So actually, last week was our like a record Whopper sales ever. So you really see how I think in moments like this, you are acquiring new guests. They come for like your brand, looking for what you are known for or what they trust you have best to offer. And then I think on the flip side of—
And the Whopper is more expensive. It's the more expensive offering on the overall menu.
Yeah, the Whopper definitely falls on the more sort of, we call it like our core portfolio, right? So let's say the price of a Whopper can be 3 times the price of a cheeseburger, and it's still, like it's the product that we are best known for. And we saw a lot of new guests coming for the Whopper. On the flip side, I think we also saw, especially among our Burger King guests, we do a sort of a weekly survey that measures confidence in their economic situation or with their finances. And we see that especially our budget basics, or the guests that really come for value, they're feeling tighter than they've been in the past. So this is the range of products that we saw the biggest decline, and then the slowest recovery. So let's say our entry price, let's say chicken sandwich or cheeseburgers, or even like small fries, small drinks, those have been more affected than other parts of our portfolio.
So just to be clear, the less priced, the lower priced items, the ones that are more economical, have been the most affected, meaning that they're the most down as compared to the bigger branded items like the Whopper. So it's the things that's sort of counterintuitive.
It is, but imagine like, if you would see, we were benefited from a sort of a trade down, right? So let's say people that normally would be going more for like the casual dinings or full service restaurants, they traded down, right? They were looking for safer like drive-thru options. They come to Burger King, and their entrance into Burger King was in a heavy way towards our like larger burgers, including the Whopper. But then in the same way that we benefit from this trade down that happened from, like a fast casual or full service restaurants into us, we also saw a portion of our more budget oriented guests where even coming to Burger King has become, now a little expensive depending on how financially tight they are, or really trying to just kind of be very conscious where they spend their money. So those are the ones that we haven't fully recovered yet. So I think those two kind of movements, so it's happening on our brain right now.
It's totally fascinating. And Adrian, you saw something very different from that. Why don't you share what you're seeing sort of in market around and similar category too?
Sure, yes, we're direct competitors. We reported our third quarter earnings last week, and that earnings report shared that we are up in the third quarter 6.6% same store sales. So we've seen a acceleration across the business, and we have also seen some of that, those more premium products performing well for us, our classic buttery jack burger, home style ranch chicken club sandwich. But in addition to that, we have seen those smaller, lower priced add-ons perform well. Like I said, it's an indulgence and that sort of, quick little gift to yourself, that little bit of snack that, provides really great value for cash-strapped customers. We, as a QSR, actually over-index with lower income consumers, even more so than some of our competitors. So we continue to see those lower priced items do well for us, whether as standalone options or as add-ons to their check. But that indulgent, guilty pleasure food that we are known for, it's very much inherent in our brand DNA, absolutely feeds that need for comfort that people have right now. The other change I think we've all seen is a move away from the breakfast day part. As consumers are no longer commuting to work, many of us saw a dip in breakfast sales initially, but because Jack in the Box is known for serving everything on our menu at any time of day, we're the only place you can get a burger for breakfast with an egg roll on the side and maybe a couple of tacos. We've actually seen those breakfast sales move to other day parts. We're still selling the breakfast items just later in the day as people aren't in their car at their normal commute time.
Yeah. So let's actually, that brings us to the first poll that we should throw up. Here we go. So what is the main reason you visited your last quick serve restaurant recently? We'll spend 10 seconds, 20 seconds, let everybody who's participating go and fill that out. All right, can we throw up the results? So a trip where quick serve was easiest meal for the journey. That's interesting. And that followed by you were sick of cooking, so you got quick serve to change things up. So that's interesting. It shows that at least for the audience, people are back on the road. Maybe they're not flying as much, or maybe they are. But in driving and commuting and moving around, quick serve really serves as the quickest meal for the journey. George, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts in terms of, are you seeing sort of movement and pickup with people traveling again? And what are you seeing on the side of, on your side of the business?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not surprising. I think we know convenience is a big play, here, and I think for us, that's why for us we're focused not just on the delivery aspect of things, but on the carryout side too. So I think we're seeing, different parts of the country. I think you can see, like, it was interesting as the country, was kind of reopening back up. You'd see, some differing results as, like, people were locked down for a while and then the country was opening back up. People wanted to get back out and eat. And, you could see differences in different parts of the country. So for us, we're kind of focused on, we're seeing similar trends, with as people are moving around, like, how do we meet them where they are and give them, what they're looking for. And for us, that's really about value. That's, like Pizza Hut value. So it's not always going to be, the lowest absolute price, but for us, it's like always giving you more. And for us, it's abundant pizzas. Like, we just launched this thing yesterday, a new product called the Double It Box, where it's like 2 medium pizzas in one box for $12.99. And so the insight is, how do you keep the whole family happy? So I saw some, one of the answers on there about, the kids wanting to go, or, keeping the kids happy. And so it's, you can get one, get what the kids want, get what you want, all for an affordable price. So we're trying to lean into, where consumers are, both physically where they are, but also kind of the mindset and, which they're in right now.
You were, when we were talking about sort of that curbside, you said that one of the big innovations is sort of app check-in. Why don't you share a little bit about that and sort of the safety of them actually putting it in the vehicle?
Yeah, it's, it's interesting. Like, we just didn't, our curbside wasn't a big thing for us because we had kind of traditional carryout. So, you order your carryout, you come in, you pop in, you pick up your pizza, and you walk back to your car. Obviously, just even that has become something customers don't want to do right now, and, understandably so. So, initially, it was like, how fast can we get contactless curbside up and running? And it was a very, kind of scrappy, like, manual thing where you put in your order, and then our team members would kind of have to be, kind of on the lookout, or customers would be calling in, and it started putting a strain on the team members, on the operations. And so thankfully our tech team worked quickly to add in, the check-in feature. So whether it's through your confirmation email or if you're on the app, when you pull into the Pizza Hut, you click on here, it prints out a notification for our team members. and then a gloved, masked team member can come right outside. They know what car it is because you put in your car description, and put that in your back seat or your trunk without having to leave the car. And so we know that there's parents that or they've got the kids in the back seat, so they don't want to get the kids out. They don't want to take the kids into a department store or a restaurant to go pick up the food. And so this was a win-win for the customer and also for our team members to keep the operations moving, because we were able to add that tech feature. So it was just an example of like iterating quickly. And like I said, it was probably, I think it's just, this whole thing is just, it's given us a new, I think Adrian said it, like agility, like we've just been forced to be much more agile and do things and find ways to do things much faster than we would have normally.
So Andy, you, in sort of talking about that journey and a little bit of what makes your restaurants different, what you mentioned is that you had an all-you-can-eat salsa bar that was really about the in-house dining experience, and everything's had to change because of that. Why don't you share a little bit about, the struggle there, what sort of was the composition of the perception of the dining experience, and what you've had to do on the digital side as well as the experience side to evolve given the current pandemic?
Yeah, I think to George's point, it's about iterating quickly. And one of the insights we had was we didn't have curbside available. And similar to George, we had to really think quickly about how we were going to develop something that was an ultimate consumer experience that they were similarly used to experiencing when they dined into our restaurants. So we literally rolled out curbside in 6 weeks. I mean, I have 20 restaurants that are launching today, and all 500 of our restaurants are going to be launched by the second week of September. So honestly, it was a 6-week process, making sure that our consumers still got that value that they got when they visited in our restaurants. So a couple of things. First off, there was a auto add salsa to pretty much every single meal that we served. So we took consumer insight to kind of get an understanding of what were customers requesting most often from a delivery perspective, from a pickup perspective, and then we would auto add those to all our bags. So operation simplicity was key. So making it easy for our team members, also for our customers. Number two, you kind of teased this a little bit earlier, but the contactless sealed delivery bag. That was another insight that we got from our customers back in January. So customers were saying that, I was really concerned about delivery drivers and or employees of the restaurant, going into the bag and potentially tampering with the food. We developed a tamper-proof sealed bag that goes out with our delivery orders now. And that's something that has really accelerated our delivery business and our growth in that channel. You really have to figure out quickly if you're doing 35% of your business inside in restaurant, how you can evolve quickly. And I think curbside and the tamper-proof delivery bag were keys to our strategy.
That's great. So Renato, moving on to you, one of the things that we want to start to think about is what's going to drive, what about the new behaviors in terms of using the app, curbside, contactless delivery? What are these features are going to sort of stay and are now part of sort of society? They're not going away. And what things will change, do you think, as society changes, as we feel safer, as things open up, as we figure out, a vaccine? How do you sort of see the business evolving going forward in the future?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. And we have run a couple of weeks ago, like a large research to try to understand exactly this point. And a few things came up, which are, I think, aligned to some of the topics we've been discussing here. But the first big conclusion that came out of this is that the off-premise consumption, meaning drive-thru or delivery, once gets, becomes part of your habit, it adds so much convenience to your, like a daily routine. It becomes even easier to get food. So your guests are probably going to, or a percentage of them are going to sustain this type of behavior. We saw, for example, guests that never ordered delivered before from us. Within the 6 weeks of the first order, a very large percentage, around like 75%, ordered again. So you can clearly see how, the habits become like incorporated into their daily routine. So even after a vaccine is found, we don't expect that the split between off-premise consumption, meaning drive-thru plus delivery, versus the dine-ins or takeouts will be the same, even though the condition will be back as safe as it was before. So this is definitely, I think, one aspect that we expect our business to lean even more than it was already into an off-premise consumption. A second point is that I think there is increased expectation for what brands need to offer you to make you feel comfortable going there. You know, I think a lot of like hygiene related topics or safety related topics, they were almost taken for granted by all brands, right? And I feel that, as many mentioned, like simple things as kind of simple saying, we are open for you, we are 24 hours, you know, we are clean. Those are, I think, very basic aspects of a restaurant operation, but I think that guests become, you know, like much more demanding on what they expect brands to do. So I think we will need, you know, like to continue to evolve into not only doing, but also showing them everything we are doing to make them feel comfortable coming to visit our restaurants. And then the third point is that I think we saw value for money has always been a huge driver of QSR. And within so much economic instability, you know, that happens, let's say, every decade once, but we are going through one of those. So what brands can offer to guests, you know, like to fit within their budgets, will probably be a little kind of demanded as well. And we are seeing already great traction from some of the actions that we're doing in improving value for money in a few items. So I think those 3 points from our perspective, these are the 3 biggest kind of habit change or behavior change that we believe will remain even after a vaccine is found.
That's great. All right, so Adrian, I'm going to ask your help in evaluating the answers to this next poll. Let's throw up the poll because it's super interesting to think about. What will drive the fastest change in consumer behavior around visiting quick serve restaurants? A vaccine, commuting to the office, a return to school, opening of bars, nightlife, and sporting events, or people are sick of grocery shopping and cooking?
These are fun questions for us too.
Give it another 20 seconds. Ten seconds, people. All right, let's throw out some of the answers.
I can tell you from a Jack in the Box perspective, we will absolutely continue to benefit by the opening of bars, nightlife, and sporting events. We were the first in the industry to launch our late night platform, and we continue to do well there. We always say that we welcome folks with no judgment at any time of the evening in whatever state you're in to come in and get a good meal to help you get home safely. And we obviously will, I think, see an uptick whether folks are out and about from the opening of bars, nightlife, and sporting events, but also just folks being out in general. You mentioned travel earlier, and I think when folks are on the go, they will look for these, you know, QSR options more consistently. But there you see in the results on the poll that the vaccine comes through as #1. I think that generally gives consumers more confidence in returning to daily normal life, whether that's related to their food choices, whether they send their kids to school, they go into the office, they do travel, whatever it may be. But I will say that I think some of the stickiness around the success that particularly Jack in the Box is seeing, and also within the category rebounding, has been related to some of these behaviors becoming more permanent. Like I said earlier, I don't think that folks will return to the February normal. I think seeing pizza, QSR, drive-thru as good, safe options because you're not dining in a restaurant will likely continue, and we'll see more of that success, whether it's a vaccine or not, whether we return to normal or not. I think this has been a permanent stair step for the category.
That's super interesting. So there's an actual longevity with the pivot that's going to take place due to sort of what we're seeing out there. Any other?
Like to be optimistic about it. Sure.
Any other thoughts with regard to those results that we just saw? You know, obviously, one of the things that I know has driven a lot of the behavior is the commute to the office. They go and grab and pick up, you know, breakfast sandwich. We've seen breakfast be one category that is down, I think, across everybody because people are not commuting for breakfast anymore. We've also talked about late night. Adrian, you've mentioned that like late night people being out and then being hungry after the bar, before the bar, swing by and picks up because people are in their homes has changed that behavior. What are going to be sort of those key points and drivers, that you think even beyond the poll questions that you think will change behavior in your respective business? Why don't we start with you, Andy, and then we can go to George.
I think one of the things that's been fascinating about COVID is we've seen an emergence of kind of a new day part that we really had not experienced as a brand before, and that was snack. And I think part of that has to do with people's meeting schedules and their behaviors relative to the way they're kind of living their COVID lifestyle. So we've seen an absolute explosion between the 3 to 5 p.m. day part, and you see a lot of people who are starting to get dinner earlier. They're getting a lot more food. I think some of the other panelists talked about this earlier, but while you see a little bit of transaction erosion, you're seeing huge growth in average check. And so people are buying more food. They're using food as leftovers to prepare for the next day. So for me specifically, I see snack as a huge opportunity, and I would have to agree with Adrian. While my brand typically isn't catering to that late night crowd, I think that's something that you could see reemerge again with bars opening. And then obviously breakfast is one of those habitual things. We're not a breakfast company, but I would say that it's certainly something that is more habit-based. And so I think as routines start to come back into play, you'll see that transaction count go up accordingly.
That's great. George, what do you think is going to sort of be the driver or change in sort of the behaviors of the business?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we're still kind of like teasing out what's temporary, what's long-term, like a couple examples, in our business, like if you could imagine, like you said, without the commutes, like the other implication there is without people going to office buildings, large party ordering, which you might imagine like offices, like groups ordering pizzas at lunch or, things like that are kind of gone for the large part. Like there's still obviously some people going into work, but it looks very different. So that's one side of the coin that's probably been a downturn for us. But on the flip side, I think the number of people eating meals together on the average in homes is much larger or more consistently larger, right? More families eating more meals together. And so that's, you kind of mentioned on those tickets, we're seeing the same thing. Our average tickets have stayed consistently high through this period. So, I think there's some degree of like, we're going to see some variance as things open up in restaurants and nightlife. But I think the reality is like the huge percentages of people are not probably going to feel like jumping back into that right away. And so I think it's going to be kind of this weird gradual unknown where we set on like what the new normal is. And so we're trying to figure out, which ones of these trends are really for the long term and which ones are more temporary.
That's great. So let's throw up one more poll and then we're going to switch and ask 1 or 2 questions about media strategy and then open up for Q&A. So let's throw up the next poll. And so this is an interesting one. What quick serve innovation will have the most profound and lasting impact to the business? And we sort of touched on this. Partnerships with major third-party delivery companies, curbside delivery, bring out to your car, put in the back seat or trunk, pre-ordering pickup and app check-in via QSR branded app, or messaging of food safety, including contactless packaging, sort of that safety messaging. Give it another 10 seconds. All right, let's pull up that answer. Pre-ordering pickup and app check-in via QSR branded app. So Renato, why don't you share what your thoughts are given what you're experiencing? Do you agree with the larger audience? Maybe we can throw that up there one more time and have Renato sort of, do we agree with that or disagree?
I definitely do, and I actually agree even with the first two, because I think both will be really important for brands. And I think we all need to think about what's the best way of doing those things, in a way that makes sense for each of the brands. and for the guests. I think the app is still, I think, in the really kind of early days of the importance it can have and it will have for, let's say, the QSR industry. I feel, for example, if you think about, like checking in on flights, how many people should they go to print their tickets? So the app has become the major, like checking sort of a tool they have. Today, our guests have from multiple brands a ordering device in their hands. I don't think they acquired the habit in large enough scale yet, but with the collective effort from us and other brands, I'm sure this will happen. And I think the second point on delivery is equally important because, like mentioned by George in one of the questions earlier, like our business has a huge, like a connection with convenience. And delivery just takes, the convenience of, like getting to a next level. And I don't think people adjust backwards, once they are used to get great food quickly at their homes. So I feel every brand will need also to think about what's the best approach to delivery, either via third parties or via, its own mobile app. There'll be options to serve guests at home. And I believe this will be a sort of a big growth opportunities for brands like us as well.
That's great. Andy, what are your thoughts?
I wish I could have picked all of the above, because quite honestly, I think that all of those points were extremely valid. I think to be a player in the restaurant industry today, you need to have a bifurcated menu strategy. You really need to be partners with, I think, all providers, in my opinion, because I think each partner speaks to a unique customer base. I think we've seen a huge growth from a owned digital channel perspective. A lot of branded apps are growing at exponential levels. Specifically from the pandemic, customers are trying branded apps for the first time. And I think you see more and more different types of retailers that are turning to this curbside type option, right? So grocery stores, it's now pretty much a green sphere, a new normal to offer curbside as part of their customer experience. You see a lot of retailers having to do it. I think restaurants have probably done it for the longest, but the restaurants who haven't been players in that avenue before are starting to become players. So I really loved all the answers. So for me, I think you really need to choose all of those for the future.
That's why I forced you to have to pick just one.
I understand.
Adrian, why don't you share with us, making a small pivot, and then we're going to go to Q&A. Given all of these changes, how has your media and communication strategy changed? Have you changed the channels that you're marketing in? Has the messaging changed? What do you think about the Facebook boycott? Which is always a hard question, but really not about Facebook, but really channels in general in terms of efficacy. Why don't you share some of that thinking?
Sure. I think it goes back to that agility. In mid-March when the pandemic hit, folks were trying to adjust to life at home. And I think it was important for us as a brand to help by standing beside them and providing some moments of relief and escape to show them that we care, we're listening, we're all in this together. And then very practically let them know that we're open. We moved very quickly to use some existing video assets to create a new campaign set of TV commercials, radio, and social that we quickly got into market at 100% share of voice that just said, we're here for you and we're open to serve you, come on in. And I think that was one of the important aspects of us being able to navigate this. We ran that for 2 weeks nonstop on all of our TV and video weight. And like I said, supported through some other digital and social channels. And then when we were seeing people show some interest in getting back out and visiting restaurants again, we started to promote LTO products again. This change required us from a messaging perspective to get pretty creative because we couldn't shoot anything new. And luckily our challenger in chief, if you will, our mascot, Jackbox, has a big white head with a fake smile and he doesn't actually move his mouth when he talks. So it's relatively easy to record some new voiceover and cut a new spot. But then from a media perspective, obviously that landscape changed incredibly, not only because folks were moving away from those commuter-driven media channels, as I mentioned earlier, but media consumption also shifted away from real-world experiences and sports to more digital content and entertainment, available on your personal devices. Folks were sent home from work, and we started to see the impact economically on our country. And so it was important for us to be in those places where people are. we worked hard to double down on not only our digital and social channels that were already working well for us. For example, we have leaned into gaming pretty significantly. We've been an authentic supporter of the gaming space over the last couple of years, but really leverage those partnerships, not only in the teams that we sponsor, but also our partnership with Twitch to capitalize on the uptick in gaming consumption. We made similar changes across streaming content and really wanted to give folks a little bit of a chance of normalcy. So, you know, when you can't go out and have a real experience, one of the things we did was throw a prom for a couple of high schools in Los Angeles whose proms had been canceled at the very last minute, and, you know, gave those kids a chance to interact with their classmates and have that memorable moment that so many of us, you know, hold dear, and then broadcast that to the public so everybody could sort of join in and engage with the top tier DJs that we had as part of the program. And we continue to look for those opportunities to give folks a little escape, a chance to connect, feel human while we're all sheltering in place separately.
That's great. Andy, what about you? You know, you're focused on digital. What are you thinking about and doing from a media perspective to basically reach those consumers differently?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a tremendous shift. I think we talked about this in our prep call, but things such as TV definitely slimmed down our contribution to overall TV spend. We did a lot of, you know, added media weight to Instagram, Facebook. We regularly use Waze. I think being consistent on that platform is very important. But, you know, you think about just the proliferation of how much time people are spending on apps and their devices during the pandemic. It's so important to be part of the conversation. And for everybody listening who is part of making that media decision, I mean, just think about your own behavior, how it's shifted, how you're consuming media differently, how you're getting information. And I think as you as a consumer shift in that journey, you have to think that's what your other consumers are doing as well. So for us, you know, it's important to be front and center, be part of that conversation. And I think as people have become less dependent on TV and out-of-home billboards, you know, you've seen digital pick up steam. It's been tremendous growth. You know, our brand, you know, ironically only had about 5% digital media spend as of July 2019, which is absolutely crazy. You know, no modern brand should have anything, in my opinion, less than 15 to 20%. And most recently, last quarter, we were at about 30%. So very, very exciting shift. And we're really happy with the progress we've made in that avenue.
I knew the choice to go into digital media and advertising was sooner or later was going to pay off.
Yes.
George, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, you know, we had to deal with, you know, making some quick pivots. Like, you know, we're a sponsor of March Madness, so obviously when that tournament just disappears, you know, you've got to figure out where to pivot to. And in a lot of cases, you know, similarly to what Adrian and Andy said, you know, that was investing in digital. So whether that was online video, we saw a lot of great results in search. So if you can, you know, imagine we were, you know, I think Renato mentioned you've got people kind of trading up and down in this new world, and so there's just we've brought in millions of new customers, and you know, pizza has just been more relevant to more people and different people, and so you know, we saw a tremendous uptick in our search, you know, the return on our search spend, which is great, and then I think it's like, you know, just finding new, like you said, like everyone's saying, like finding, you know, the where are people moving to, whether that's, you know, podcasts, whether that's, you know, for us, we're a partner of the NFL, and, you know, obviously that season's still kind of, you know, football's still a big question mark, but, you know, we've done things with like the Madden property, you know, where whether the season happens or not, you know, we've got, you know, naming rights on Pizza Hut Stadium within the Madden game, and that's going to be a big part of the football experience this fall, whether, you know, there's a delay in the season or you know, we don't know what happens. And so just trying to, you know, make smart bets in terms of where to put your brand where, you know, people are going to.
We found that mobile editorials is growing like crazy. People are reading more and more articles and content on their phone when they're bored. Let's go to questions. Gina, you were going to, can you pick one or two questions? Because we only have 3 minutes. Renato, maybe can take the first question. Handing it over to you.
Sure. First of all, such an informative conversation. Thank you all. Some QSRs have begun rolling out loyalty programs? Are there hesitations or limitations from your brand in implementing such programs?
Renato, what are your thoughts?
I think like it's not a great loyalty programs is a complex word to navigate, right? So I think you need to think about really well on what you're trying to achieve as a brand, what type of behavior change you're trying to achieve, how we want to reward the loyal guests, and the metrics are looking for. So I believe that any brand today that doesn't have yet a fully launched loyalty program is probably working on one or evaluating one. I think it's part of like the digital journey and evolution of many brands. In our case, I think delivery and the overall launch of the mobile app came first. There is definitely a lot of discussion happening on loyalty. We just didn't see a sort of a need to kind of rush through and launch it during the COVID times as much as we saw things like, increased rollout of delivery service availability or making sure that we're taking action on our drive-thrus. But I don't think there is a hesitation. There is just, I think, a very big amount of work that needs to be done in order to figure out all the details of a great loyalty program and then launch them successfully.
Sounds great. I know, Andy, you just relaunched in COVID your loyalty program. Why don't you share that? And then maybe, I don't know what you guys are doing on time. Maybe we can do one more question and then wrap it up.
Yeah, I completely agree with Renato. You have to be very tactful with the way you roll out your loyalty program. I think part of it is what is the customer lifetime value? What's the churn? How does your email look? What's the overall value to the consumer of speaking loyalty to your brand? I think as demonstrated, I think 3 or 4 other big QSR brands revamped their loyalty program over the course of the last 4 or 5 weeks. And for me, at the end of the day, it's I have this framework that I tend to work with. It's insight, objective, action, results. And that framework is usually good in terms of trying to figure out what type of strategy you want to proceed with. And for us, very key to understanding what the consumer insights were relative to the previous performance of our program. And then, working closely with my agency partners, we felt very comfortable with the way that we're in the process of relaunching. I wouldn't say we've relaunched yet, but we have about 3 or 4 weeks from that relaunch and super excited about it. And it's been really good to have that dialogue with our consumers as part of that journey.
Maybe we'll follow up and get that on the Ad Club blog in terms of some of your experiences around that. Gina, do you want to ask one last question and we'll have George and Adrian close us out?
Given the lean into digital, do you consider yourself a tech or food business today?
George.
I think we pride ourselves on being a food business for sure. First and foremost, it's all about, making the best tasting pizza out there. So, we don't, we always consider ourselves a food company first, but I think you do have to be both in this world. So, especially in our category, with so many people accessing our brand through digital channels, like we have to be uber focused on how to deliver the best customer experience through digital. But we'll always be a pizza company first.
Adrian, why don't you close us out with that final?
What he said. I think that's exactly true. I mean, first and foremost, we're here to serve our guests really delicious, indulgent food, but we need to do it whenever, however, wherever they are. And, being available in all those channels, it's not a question of app versus delivery or drive-through versus takeout or, curbside pickup versus something else. It's all of the above. And so really giving people a great experience and how they get that delicious, craveable food is the future of the business for sure.
Well, I wanted to thank you all for showing up today. I think we had an amazing group of participants that participated and answered polls and were thoughtful, probably gave us all a lot of, no pun intended, or maybe pun fully intended, food for thought. And we'll publish some of those polls and answers, and just wanted to thank you all. As you guys think through these challenging times, I'm just thrilled to be here and be able to ask some of these interesting and hard questions, and would love to do a follow-up in 6 months when we actually start to see the other side of this and see how we all net out as we sort of start to think about the future and what the possibilities are. So thank you to everybody. Gina, thank you so much for bringing us all together and hosting, and the Ad Club of New York. Really, really appreciate all of your time and attention, and looking forward to seeing how we all navigate through the future.
Ditto. Thank you all for joining. There's a survey after this. One more poll question. Thank you all, Adrian, Renato, George, Andy, and of course, Harry. Thank you for your informative, thoughtful comments, and we look forward to doing this again. Thank you all and have a great day.